Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. Today, I want to start things out by giving you a refresher on what came this week on Uncredible.me, that is the Substack. And our first article, this was a new article that came out on Wednesday, was called Crushing Forgotten Goals. And just a quick recap, I was on Facebook Memories this week. Actually, it was kind of the end of last week, beginning of this week. And an image from 2020 of my treadmill accomplishment. Back then, it was an accomplishment. And it said, I had written on the post, new personal record, I'm going to be chasing 5.25 miles in 1 hour. So in that particular image, I had run 5.15 miles on the treadmill, and that was my personal best. And after hitting that, I must have made that post and said, I'm going to go for 5.25. And I just kind of decided to compare that to the treadmill run that I did this past Saturday, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And it turns out that I ran, if I can remember correctly, I think I ran 5 miles in 47 minutes. So that was part of my Saturday run. So literally Saturday I did that, and that was after running 7.7 miles outside. So I ran 7 miles outside in -2-degree weather, came inside and ran 5 miles, and basically I set the treadmill to 6.6 and then stopped every so often to drink or rest. But ultimately, I ran the 5 miles after the 7 in, I think it was 47 minutes. I can't remember. So then Sunday, I get this Facebook memory, and it just really struck me because when I was running those 5 miles after the 7, so it ended up being a 12-mile run on Saturday, I was actually kind of disappointed in my pace. And the reason was the week prior, I had done that exact same thing, but I set the treadmill to like 7.0 and was able to pretty much go most of the 5 miles at 7.0. So on this particular run, I did 6.6, and I was like, man, I should be getting faster. I should be getting better. And then this Facebook memory pops up and reminds me that just 6 years ago, it took me an hour to run 5.15 miles, and I considered that really good. Like, that was a personal best. I was proud of it. And yet here I was the day prior, last Saturday, disappointed in that. Now, of course, do the math on that. I was like, oh, well, that was after you ran 7 miles outside. So you got to factor that in. But that means I should be able to go a little bit faster. And I'll share how my Monday treadmill test went. But on Uncredible.me, the Substack, there's a whole article about crushing forgotten goals. And I just kind of talk about how easy it is to get caught up in our day-to-day goal setting. And we fall short. We don't quite make it. And we're frustrated in ourselves. And you might look at your progress from last week or the last 3 weeks and go, I really haven't improved, or maybe it's gotten worse. That article is just an encouragement to remind you to maybe take a step back and look at the last year, 5 years, 10 years, and evaluate based on that and see how you're progressing. The second article was yesterday. Our throwback article was Your Children Will Face the World Alone. Now, I originally wrote this article right after Shadir Sanders, I don't know how to say his first name, Shadir Sanders. He was in the NFL draft last year, and they were expecting him to be like a late first round, early second round quarterback pick, and he fell, I think he fell to the 5th round. I can't remember what it was exactly, but in that article, I look at some of the things, particularly 3 lessons that kind of stood out to me when I was looking at his life and Deion Sanders' involvement with his life going through college and being his coach. And just some of the things that we can learn from that, and some of the challenges that we as parents face when our kids are getting older. They don't fully depend on us, so we have to kind of navigate that difficult thing where they're still our kids, they're still in our house, and they still on some level depend on us, but that dependency begins to wane, and we don't want them to depend on us forever, but at the same time, we don't want to put them out there and have them fail miserably because we weren't there to support them. So it's sort of this like delicate balance of pushing them out the door, but saying, hey, I'll be there for you. And it's something I'm really going through right now with my kids because they're reaching that age. My son's turning 18 next week. My daughter will be 16 in May. My youngest daughter is going to be turning 13 soon. So we're at that phase in life where our kids are past the point of depending on us, and they surprise us all the time with how responsible they can be. And then other times you're like, you have to almost remind yourself that they're still kids because they will do things that impress you over and over and over. And you're like, wow, they've really come a long way. And then other times you're like, really? Like you forgot your backpack? I'm going to be writing an article in 2 weeks about my daughter forgetting her backpack. And it's a long story. That article's coming down the road. I haven't written that one yet. But like, they're super responsible. They do their chores. And my middle daughter is in Winter Guard, and she successfully paid for most of that. She did all the fundraisers herself this year. And in past years, we've had to help her. She's done pretty much all of it herself this year, and she handed me the bill yesterday and showed me that she's down to zero on everything except for the last $50. So each one of my kids, I had my son Alexander on the podcast last week. They each impress me in so many different ways, but then this article will talk about there's also times where you just have to let them, that you might not agree with what they're doing or how they're going about things. You just have to kind of got to learn where it's appropriate to step in and where it's not. And it's a delicate balance. I mean, you run the risk of making them doubt themselves, and then they don't want to make decisions, or they don't feel confident in making those decisions. Or you run the risk of like not saying anything, and a real bad thing happens, and you're like, oh, I should have stepped in. If you go back and listen to my interview with my son last week, we talked about the moment when we were heading up to Rochester, and I don't think he's ever driven on the highway until this time in a real bad winter storm. And he was acting like he had it under control. But even in those first couple streets, I was sitting in the passenger seat thinking, the speed he's going and the amount of gap that he's giving himself when he comes to a stoplight is just not enough. And I was kind of thankful that when we hit that on-ramp and it wasn't plowed, it wasn't salted, he started to slide and it almost got out of control. And I was sitting there, I say it in the interview, I really didn't think we were going to make it. I thought we were going to go in a ditch. And I was going to have a conversation like, you need to take it a little easier with these stopping and turns when you're in this weather. And I think, thankfully, early on, that gave him sort of a gut check. And he was able to sort of reserve himself and back off a little bit, recognizing that, hey, this is different than normal driving. So go to uncredible.me. Feel free to subscribe. It's free. You'll get it's basically 3 emails a week. I do a Wednesday article, Thursday throwback article, and then we do the podcast on Saturday. So it goes Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday right now. Down the road, I am thinking about a lot of other content that I might throw in there. I'm thinking about doing a paid tier where I'm thinking about putting together an audiobook and releasing that in pieces on the paid side before I actually release it as a published book, a self-published book. But it'll be basically what I'm looking at is I'm thinking about doing a book about this whole concept of Uncredible, and I want to produce it as an ebook and then publish it also as an audiobook. And the easiest way to do that is to just do that in pieces. But right now, if you go to uncredible.me, you can sign up for the free email, free updates. All the content right now is free. If I start having paid for stuff, I'll throw that out there down the road, put it in the podcast or whatever, and let you guys know. But right now it's all free. And I've really made, for me, this is a big step with the Substack. I've finally been able to get 1 week ahead on writing articles. It's very difficult for me to plan ahead in that way because I like my articles and I like my podcast to be in the moment. I want it to work with what's happening in the culture around us. And it's so easy to you schedule an article or you schedule, like if I tried to record a podcast like this and then all the world's events change in a week and that podcast becomes totally pointless, it's hard to release it at that point. And it's kind of weird and it puts that lag. So I really like my stuff to really track with what's actually happening in my life and in your life and in the world. So I did figure out a way to keep the content specific, not necessarily to world events, and tie it more towards something that can be understood, ingested at any point in time. And so I finally was able to write, record, and edit a full 2 articles, so I can actually announce next week's articles right here on the podcast. So next week on uncredible.me, on the Substack, I have 2 articles coming out. On Wednesday, it's going to be collecting chips, betting against the quiet, and this is a story that will almost definitely end up in my book if I do end up writing that ebook. It's sort of built around a story where I had an interaction early on in my factory work with, for all intents and purposes, a bully. A guy who was trying to get me in trouble. I really, to this day, do not know what his motivation was, and I bring that out in the article, but look forward for that article. That'll be next Wednesday. I share how he and I interacted and how I personally have this thing about me where I kind of file away when people do things, and when they do those things and they start acting in an unjust way or an unfair manner, I will bring those things up. And I can't control it. It's just in me. And I talk about it, and that's where the title comes from, collecting chips. Chips like betting chips that you can cash in at the end of the night. I do it naturally, and I'll share more about that in the article. And then next week, our throwback article, the title is called Death by Overwork. And basically what I talk about is this concept of karoshi. Is a Japanese concept where people were actually dying because they were working themselves to death. And they coined this term, karoshi, that means death by overwork. And I talk about how you can take that principle of karoshi, which is a very negative thing in Japan, and you can flip it on its head and use it as a motivating principle. So next week, look for collecting chips and death by overwork on the Substack at uncredible.me. Also, if you're not a reader, you're not interested in reading these articles that I'm talking about each week, I've set up Spotify to have full rundowns of the podcast as well as the Substack articles. Now, the podcast is Uncredible Podcast, which you can find on Spotify. But I've also got a separate feed, which I talked about last week, called Uncredible Readings. Uncredible Readings. And you'll notice that the Uncredible Podcast logo is red. That one is blue. So that's how you can kind of tell the difference if you're searching for it on Spotify. And basically all that is each one of my articles read by me. It's just the voiceover, and it's 5 to 10 minutes. So if you hear me talking about these articles, but you're not interested in reading articles, you can just go to the Spotify and add that to your list of things. I don't read them on camera for YouTube. I think that's kind of weird. But you can search for Uncredible Readings on Spotify and hear all the articles. They're all published on there for free. Check that out. Also, if you're on YouTube, Spotify, however you're listening to this, it's really helpful if you like it, each episode that you listen to, and then follow so that you get more episodes, but more importantly, so that we get more followers. That's kind of important to the algorithm in moving us up the ranks and exposing the content to other people. So if you can do that, that's great. If not, that's fine. Just keep listening, and we enjoy that. All right, let's get into our weekly update. This week was week 6 of marathon training, and it has been a rough week. I'm just going to be honest. It's one of those weeks where all the motivation I had to do this marathon training has really just been like, ugh, what am I doing this for? And I can tell you when it started. I've already shared earlier when I was talking about the article Crushing Forgotten Goals. Last Saturday, I ran 7 miles outdoors in -2 degrees, and then I came in and I ran 5 miles on the treadmill. I'm really loving that pattern. It's good. I don't think I'll have to do that tomorrow for my long run because it sounds like we're going to be in the mid 30s to 40s here. So the weather is starting to trend in the right direction for running outdoors. So I may try to do a really long run tomorrow. I'll explain why here in a minute. So Sunday is my normal rest day. I'm supposed to do my upper body lifting, push-ups, dumbbells, just shoulder work, things like that, just to keep building strength in the upper body. And I just totally skipped that because I just kind of felt like I was worn out. So I was like, we'll count it as a rest day. And in my head, I was thinking I'll do that tomorrow, or maybe I'll push that to Wednesday when I have my second rest day of the week. And it didn't happen. So what did happen was I got that, as I mentioned earlier from the article, I got that memory from Facebook. And it really got me thinking, like, if 6 years ago I was running 5.15 miles in 60 minutes, where am I at today? And I couldn't get that thought out of my head. So all night, Sunday night at work, I was thinking, man, I wonder how fast I can actually go. And I was doing research on time and things like that. And finally I settled on it. I was like, I'm going to go home today. I'm going to do my 7-mile run, and I'm just going to run for 60 minutes straight. My goal was 6 to 7 miles, and this is where I made the mistake. The pace for that particular one is only supposed to be like 10 minutes per mile, but because I had it in my head that I wanted to stress test my body and see how fast I could go, I came home and I set out to run as many miles as I could on the treadmill as fast as I could in 60 minutes. And the good news is, my 60-minute test, I was able to complete 7.1 miles. The average pace was 8.27 per mile. So 8 minutes, 27 seconds per mile, which is pretty good for me. That's really good for me, especially for 7 full miles. However, I really wore myself out. And I didn't even realize the extent to which I wore myself out until the week continued to progress. And it was a combination of losing sleep throughout the week and this workout and what I think may have been a cold that I developed. I'm not sure about that part of it. I've been dealing with a lot of sinus issues and I've been working through that. It doesn't seem to be causing me too much lag, but man, I have just been at work, I've been dragging, and then when I come home in the morning, I just have not felt like running, and I couldn't bring myself to run. And that's actually going to be our main topic a little bit later. Like, how do you make that decision between listening to your body and avoiding injury, but also pushing through, and like, where's the line on that? And so what happened was Tuesday comes along and I'm in this mode where I'm like, oh, I am really tired, but you know what? The plan is to do an easy 6 to 6.5 miles. So we'll go out there and we'll just give it our best. And I'm telling you, I even wrote in my notes, it was a sluggish 6.5 miles. I don't even remember what the times were. It probably was my slowest run for this training block. Every 1.5 to 2 miles, I had to stop and walk. I was just beat, and I was feeling it. I could tell by the end of that run. A lot of times the hardest part of the run for me is getting the gear on, especially outdoors in the winter, getting the gear on and just getting out the door. Once I'm out the door, usually by mile 2 or 3, I'm into it. I'm like, oh, you know what? This is actually going very well. And my spirits lift up and I'm like, yeah, this has been good. Burning some energy. Tuesday's run never got better. It just kept dragging on and on. I couldn't convince myself to go at a faster pace. I could feel what I think, like I mentioned, was a cold coming on. I just wasn't feeling it. And as I'm like 4 or 5 miles into that run, and just so you understand, the first 3 or 4 miles of my run are flat to uphill. So it's like sort of you're moving upwards throughout that. And then as I come around to the back half of my run, it's mostly downhill from there. And it's not, when I say downhill, I'm not talking like a steep grade, but you're kind of trucking along those first 4 miles and you're just sort of slowly moving uphill. And when you hit the 4 to 4.5 mile marker, it starts to go downhill and you get the wind at your back and you just feel good, usually. I got to the steepest downhill section where if I was going to make up any pace or time, that was the place to do it. And I had to stop and walk. I was like, it's just not there. And I could feel in my chest and in my sinuses. I was like, man, I just feel heavy. I was like, I think I need rest. Like, I was really convinced at that point that there was more going on than I realized when I started the run. And I go back to the mistake I made on Monday by pushing myself too hard. That wasn't in the training block. I did the mileage I was supposed to, but I didn't do the pace. And I think I overdid it. As fun as it was to do and as excited as I was to be able to run 7.1 miles in 1 hour, I think it took a lot out of me. And I could really feel it on that Tuesday run. So what happened next was Wednesday morning is normally a rest day anyway. It's a rest, and I'm supposed to do my leg lift. A lot of times I end up just shifting to mobility for that day. I didn't have anything in me. I decided by the end of that Tuesday run that I was going to be sleeping. I was going to get good sleep and get good rest on Wednesday. Well, a lot of good that plan did me, because I'm resting and I'm taking it easy on Wednesday, and I realize that I need to do my taxes. And I had been telling my wife I would do my taxes, and here I was with this decision to rest. Well, I might as well use that time to do the taxes, right? Taxes don't usually take me that long. So I work nights, as I've mentioned in the past. And here I am, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, trying to click through the last steps in the online process for H&R Block. And I mean, it wasn't too clunky. I got through it. But once I start something like that, I kind of got to finish it mentally or else I won't sleep. I didn't get to bed till 3 o'clock. Now, just so you guys understand, on third shift, when I go to work at 10:30, I get up around 8:30. For me to go to bed at a normal time would be like noon at the latest. For most people, that would be like going to bed at midnight to get to work in the morning by 10:30, right? If you started your shift in the morning at 10:30, you'd want to be up at 8:30, and you'd want to be in bed the night before by 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, you just flip that around, the 12 hours. All week long, I wasn't getting good sleep. I was up till, Sunday I don't get good sleep anyway. I wrapped that whole night into that intense run, which I did on Monday. Then I forced myself to do my run on Tuesday, didn't get good sleep that day. Wednesday, I'm up till 3 o'clock. So at this point, I'm just like, Thursday, I'm supposed to go out and do a 7-mile run. And I'm feeling it. I woke up Wednesday night to go to work. My sinuses are just shot. Not feeling the greatest. Just tired, worn out. And I'm just feeling the effects of this week and the way it's been going. And I made the decision probably on my way home from work that this probably wasn't going to be a run day. And you know what's funny? When I got out of work that morning, Thursday morning, it was like 22 degrees outside, but it felt so cold. And the reason that's weird is because I was just out the previous Saturday in -2 degrees. That was really cold. That was objectively cold, and I didn't really feel it. I mean, I felt it, but I was like, this is fine. I can handle it. When I got out of work Thursday morning, I was like, it was in my bones. I was like, oh, this is so bad. And it wasn't windy. It was just a light snow, and it was just like, it's just not good. I get home. I finally make the decision. Technically, Thursday would have been the first day that I really took a rest day. There was one other day in this training block where I didn't do what I was supposed to do, but I always try to make the mileage up somewhere else. But at this point, I kind of decided I have to legitimately cut this run out of the week. I'm not sure what's going on, but I have to get some rest. I got to heal up. And if anything, I'll make it up. Not really make it up, but I'll go for a longer run on Saturday, which is tomorrow, when I'm rested and when the weather's supposed to be just a little bit better. So, And I'm already planning for that run to be kind of a lighter run just so I can get longer mileage. But man, it has been one of those training weeks where since Monday, I haven't felt good training or thought about training or felt good about the idea of training the rest of the week. And I'm hoping by tomorrow, I'll feel like I want to get out there and run. One thing that happens to me, so last night I worked, tonight I do not work. Inevitably, I will take a nap today at some point. I'll eat dinner with my family. I'll go to bed at like a normal time, like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And there's nothing I can do to control it at this point. I wake up at 4 in the morning. My guess is at 4 in the morning, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to feel like I want to go on a run. I can tell you that by the end of my shift today, I was feeling like I could go for a run. It's actually a little warmer outside right now. It's like in the 30s. And I was like, ooh, I could go for a run. But I'm kind of forcing myself not to do anything super intense today because I don't want to mess up the long run tomorrow. I am trying to build for distance for the Buffalo Marathon. So I think what's most beneficial for me is to have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days off. Wednesday and Friday are typically lighter days anyway. Wednesday is sort of like a mobility leg lift. Friday's a rest day. So I'll cut Thursday out. These 3 days will be a nice little recovery time. I'll get good rest today and into tonight. Tomorrow we'll come back, we'll put together a decent long run, and we'll just move forward from there. So that's kind of how it went this week. I don't know if you've ever had weeks like that where you're just not on your game, but we'll talk about it in our main topic. But sometimes you just have to do what your body's telling you and let your body heal up. And for me personally, generally that only takes about 3 or 4 days. In a actual flu or cold situation where I'm genuinely sick, that can take up to a week, but I'm a pretty motivated individual, so I don't stay down for very long. So now let's turn to our new segment. I've got this listed as in the news, but basically just giving you my uncredible thoughts about what I've been listening to throughout the week that is in culture, in the news. And the only thing that's in the news right now is these Epstein files. That's all I'm hearing. If you're getting something different, please say it in the comments, because last week the Epstein files dropped and I gave what I thought would be my only thought on it, but then this week has just been more. I think they're going to get probably 3 months out of this, maybe more. It almost seems like the Epstein files are going to carry themselves into the midterm elections and be the talking point that both sides use against each other. Based on the interactions that I saw, Pam Bondi was in front of Congress, and watching her spar with members of Congress, and the Democrats going after Republicans about the Epstein files, Pam Bondi going after the Democrats who are in Congress about the Epstein files. It was very interesting to watch, and you could tell how they've turned this into a political leverage point. And it's kind of disturbing considering what's actually in these files and what was actually going on. It's disturbing that it's becoming a political tool for one side or the other to leverage so that they can get elected in the next election. That part of it's definitely pretty awful to notice. But what stood out to me, and as I've mentioned in the past, I don't want to talk about the things that you can listen to on every other podcast. I want to come up with something that's just uncredible. Normal, everyday guy thoughts. And my normal, everyday thought on this whole situation was, does anybody read anymore? And you might be thinking, why is that your thought? Well, this past week, Thomas Massey and one other member of Congress went in to look at these files. And they went through the files and they looked at them. And in 2 hours, they came out with basically enough evidence to suggest that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel lied under oath when they said that there were no co-conspirators. There was nobody else involved with this except for Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And what was interesting to me about that was listening to Pam Bondi and thinking back to what I've heard Kash Patel say. I was like, I don't know that these people have even looked at these files, with any sort of depth or intentionality. I'm not sure why. I'm not even going to speculate as to why, because that begins a whole rabbit hole that everyone else is talking about. Like, why would they be trying to cover it up? I'm not sure anyone on the right anyway, or at least anyone in the current administration, is necessarily trying to cover anything up. I mean, it seems that way. It seems like there's some of that going on. But I almost wonder if they just didn't want to deal with it. And the reason I say that is I was thinking about, just in general, some of the situations I run into at work and even in my personal life, where I'll send somebody an email or I'll send them a text, and they will send back a question that was specifically addressed in the email or in the text or in the message. Like, it's right there. Like, they just, in some cases, they didn't read the whole thing. In other cases, they sort of skimmed it and jumped around and jumped to some conclusions, and were a couple lines jumped out to them that they could argue with or respond to, and they don't really try to like comprehend what was actually being said. Sometimes there's miscommunication, but I was thinking to myself, personally, I don't do a lot of reading. In fact, here's a funny one. One of the things I wanted to do this year, and I probably need to get back to this book is in my desk. My wife got it for me for Christmas, Running for Good. It's one of these chicken soup for the soul things, but it's just a bunch of little short stories about running, I think. I've only read 2 of them. I think they're all about running. But I have read 2 of those this year, and then I kind of let it drop off the wayside. Didn't get into it. But listening to these people talk and latch on to little segments of the Epstein files and things like that, it's like, does anybody even do the work of like reading? Last week I talked about how many documents 3.5 million would be if it was like on a sheet of paper, printed out and palletized, and how long it would take to read those. But then I was thinking this week, I was like, I wonder if anybody even reads anymore. Like, really reads to understand and comprehend what they're reading and draw connections. And it's the same with talking and tweeting and all these short form text interactions. Does anybody like actually slow down long enough to listen and hear? I put in my notes, I said, I've noticed people skim read or only read the first portion and then respond. And this is so common. When I'm watching these hearings, Pam Bondi being grilled, I'm like, she doesn't seem like she knows the answer to the question. Like, she knows the question's there and she knows it's a valid question, but she doesn't seem knowledgeable. And I don't know if that's even necessarily a mistake. It might be on purpose. And I remember Kash Patel saying something like they didn't see any co-conspirators in the documents that he's aware of. Well, if he didn't read any of them, then he's not aware of them, right? Now, what Thomas Massie has done is he's proven that they redacted, which means they read and took an active movement, a name that they weren't allowed to. So that suggests that somebody, not necessarily the leaders, but somebody was told to read a name and redact it. So we know that intention is there. But in general, I don't get the impression that the people at the highest levels are even really consuming anything with any detail. It's almost like they hear all the sound bites and then they play off of those sound bites. And both sides are doing it. You can hear, one of the things that stood out to me in that hearing was how both sides were just talking right past each other. Like, they knew in the context of their own argument what fit their storyline. And if the other side got outside of it, they would just stay in their little box. They didn't consider the other side. And part of that is they're trying to avoid being found guilty of something or being held in contempt or getting in trouble or whatever. They're just trying to keep themselves safe. But at the other side of it is that it doesn't seem like they even know. Like, right now, my position on the Epstein files is that they just didn't do anything. And then when they were pushed to do something, they started looking and they were like, crap, we said this wasn't here when we didn't even look at it. And now it is here. We probably should have looked at it. Like, I'm under the impression, like, the thing that makes the most sense to me right now, like why the administration has acted the way it has, is there are people who are in these files who could make the economy look bad or could cause the economy to go bad if they were exposed. Donald Trump, knowing that, basically wanted them to leave it alone. Let's forget about this. Let's not even deal with it. Just tell everybody there's nothing there. And they tried that. But then they were forced to look at it, and now that they're looking at it, they're going, oh, there was something there. That makes the most sense to really explain what's been going on. Like, I could definitely see somebody like Donald Trump saying, hey, we want good numbers, and we want the economy to look good. And if we reveal this, I know certain businessmen or people named in there who will pull out of the stock market or pull out of this or that, and it'll hurt the world economy. That'll make my presidency look bad, so let's not do the Epstein thing. I don't think it's as much about, a lot of the Democrats are saying, oh, well, if you knew that you weren't in the files, why wouldn't you release them? That would be why, right? And it's not a mistake that Pam Bondi, for some unknown reason, starts talking about the Dow Jones in this Epstein hearing. It was the weirdest thing ever, unless you recognize the fact that there are people potentially named in there that could affect the Dow Jones, that could affect retirements, that, hey, senators, you guys have a lot of money in the stock market. And I'm not saying it, but if you keep going down this road, that stock market's going to go crazy. And they're not drawing that conclusion, but that seems to be the conclusion that she's come to, because why else would you bring that up? Like, why else would you bring up the fact that the stock market is doing well in a hearing about child sex trafficking and people connected to Jeffrey Epstein who's doing that? Where do those two things meet? I mean, it was the most, if you think about it in the context of what's going on and having victims in the room at the time, it was crazy for her to say that. Like, it was just crazy. And I'm not on either side of this thing. Actually, if I'm on a side, it's probably Thomas Massey's side of let's get to the bottom of this whole thing. But man, listening to her responses, it's like, what are you talking about? And even she seems surprised that they don't care about the stock market. And it's like, we're not here to talk about the stock market. What are you doing? I mean, I listen to it and I'm just like, whoa, this is weird. Now, there are some people who think that's important. And why are we talking about Epstein when there's so many bigger things that we could be talking about? It's like, yeah, that's not going to hit. It's not going to work. But my uncredible thought about all this news and watching watching Thomas Massey do what he's doing is pretty awesome, because he seems like he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's catching people in these little mistakes. And the whole thing just makes me wonder, does anybody actually read and consume information anymore, or do they just go off of tweets and quotes? I used to speak publicly in my job long ago, and I had this rule for myself to avoid this exact thing. And then the rule was, I don't quote somebody in a sermon or in a speaking engagement unless I've read their entire work. Like if I'm quoting somebody I used to quote a lot was C.H. Spurgeon. And it really was important to me to have read the entire, whether it was the book or the chapter or the sermon that he had written, that I had read the entire thing so that I knew that I wasn't taking him out of context. Nowadays, I don't know that anyone even cares. They see a little snippet on Twitter, or they flip open a book and they read it and they go, oh, and then they just launch from there onto their thing, and it either supports them or it's something they can argue against. And they just leave it at that. They don't really spend any time doing it. So there's my uncredible thought for the news this week. Does anybody actually read anything anymore? My guess is the vast majority of Americans and people in the world in general do not. All right, let's get into our main topic. All right, our main topic this week is the delicate balance between chasing goals and finding rest. As I mentioned earlier, this week has been a tough week, and I tend to lean towards when my mind says, oh, I don't feel like going on a run today, or I don't feel like going to work today. My typical response to that is, too bad. You're going on the run, you're going to go to work. And there really is this delicate balance between pushing yourself, and I talked about it last week in the Uncredible.me article, pushing your limits, or pushing too far, I think it was called. Regardless, there is a limit, and I think a lot of times we don't push to the limit, but then there are times where we do get there, and sometimes we don't realize it. It doesn't hit us that we're there, and we do keep going. And I think that's the mistake I made on Tuesday. I really think if I had taken a day of rest on Tuesday, I may have been able to complete my week's training if I had just flopped a couple of days. But you've probably heard the notion of listen to your body, right? And a lot of times my body says, don't do it, and I can go a couple more reps. David Goggins has this quote. It's like, when your mind says it's time to quit, you're at 40%. And basically what he's saying is you have so much more to give physically than your mind will often allow you to actually give. Like you start doing these things in your head where you're like, oh, I'm about to pull a hamstring, but you're not even close. Or I might pass out, but you're not even close to that. But then sometimes you're right there and you're pushing yourself too far, you're pushing yourself too hard. And you do need to listen to your body. And it's such a balance, because we know that in order to, whether you're talking about muscle building or in endurance racing, it's building mileage so that you can go further and further and further. You have to push your body. You have to, when your body says to stop, you have to go just a little bit further in order to stretch it and make it stronger. But how far do you stretch it? Like, when your mind and your body are telling you, hey, this is too far, but in your heart of hearts, you want to go further, and so you're trying to train and push, those limits are hard to find. It can be very difficult to tell the difference between I've reached my limit and I need to go a little further if I want to grow. I think for the most part, probably the average person needs to push themselves further and further. But then I look at some of these people that I see doing endurance racing and lifting and just anything that's sort of on the extreme level of any particular field. Those are the people who really need to hear the message, hey, listen to your body. And maybe the better thing to say is learn your body, get to know your body. Because if you don't ever push past when your body says stop, you're never going to grow, right? Like if you're used to lifting 20-pound dumbbells, 10 reps at a time for four sets, and that's all you ever do, you're not really going to grow. You're not going to be able to do 5 sets. You're never going to get to the point where you can do 30 pounds. If you don't ever step up and push your body past it, the process is to go a little further, heal up, and then go back, do it again, build some consistency, then push a little further, and then rest. And you got to have that back and forth in order for your body to grow. So I think really what it comes down to is you have to know your body and you have to learn your body. I remember when I was in college, I had never... Listen, when I was in growing up in elementary school, high school, even into my first couple of years of college, I was not an athletic person. The only sports that I did were basketball, and I did a little bit of bowling, which, I mean, some people might not even consider that a sport. When I got to college, I was in a dorm of some people who lifted weights, and they encouraged me to join them in lifting weights. And so I said, yeah, let's do this. And I remember one day we lifted legs, and I did leg presses, hamstring curls. I did all kinds of machinery, and I just went after it because I'd never lifted before, so I had no idea what I could do. And as I was doing it, I was like, oh, I can do more, I can do more, I can do more. The next day, when I tried to walk up the steps to my classroom, I was leaning on the railing, limping my way up those stairs because I had no idea how hard I was pushing my body. And then another situation that happened was we went to lift upper body. I had never done curls. I had never done shoulder presses. And the guys were, I don't remember what weight the dumbbells were, but the guys were helping me do dumbbell presses, right? Shoulder presses. I was doing this. Never done it before. And they were behind me saying, you can do more, you can do more. And they had this mentality like, hey, keep pushing, you can do it. You've got this. And I got to like rep 10 or 11 and I was like, guys, I got to stop. And they're like, no, you can do two more. And I was like, 1, 2, and I'm pushing. And then the guy there was a dorm mate of mine. He was my dorm leader, I think. I think he was the head of the dorm. Like, we were each in a dorm and we had one guy who was responsible for all of us. And he was sort of like lightly touching my elbows, like right here, and slowly guiding me up and down. And I remember I got to like right here and my hands just go, and the dumbbells hit the ground. He jumped back because I don't think he realized that I was at the limit. And they all started chuckling and saying, hey, he just hit the wall. I had no idea where my limit was in either situation. The more you do lifting, running, exercise, stretching, all these things, the more you start to learn what your body's capable of and how much further you can push past that limit. And I know on Monday when I was doing the 60-minute time trial to see how far I could run in 60 minutes on the treadmill, I hit a point in that run that I also have only hit one other time in running, and it was during my half marathon, the end of my half marathon, where I just got this random tingling feeling in my head, like towards the back of my skull, and I just started pounding, kind of like a headache's coming on. And I was like, oh, I've been here before. But the last time that happened, I started to panic. I'm pretty sure it was mile 11 of my 13-mile first half marathon. And I thought, something's really wrong. Something's very wrong. Like, this is not normal. Now, here, when I was doing this on the treadmill, there was no heat involved. I've told the stories in previous episodes about my long runs in the heat and where I've had to quit. It reminded me of that when I was in the half marathon. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to have to quit, and I don't want to quit. When I started to feel that same sensation at about mile 6 of running at 7.2 miles an hour on the treadmill, I'm at mile 6, pushing myself. I started to feel that, and I was like, oh, I've been here before. And instead of slowing down, I just let it ride. Now, luckily for me, that was at the end of that particular training session, because I was at like 50, I think it was at like 55 minutes or whatever, and I was slowly ticking off the time. I was pretty much banking on the fact that I would hit that 7 miles. But when it happened to me in the half marathon, I was 2 miles out from being complete, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, and I definitely don't want to pass out. So the more you do these things, the more you push yourself. I don't know that the right quote to follow is listen to your body, because sometimes your body gives you mixed messages, especially the longer you do something. And I'm not sure that always pushing your limits is the best thing either. So I think the best thing to do is to get to know your body. And have you been here before? If you have been here, like if you get to a point physically where I've been in this exact situation, I felt these same sensations before, and I've never pushed past it, maybe push a little further and see what happens. Pay attention to what happens, because it's probably something that's happened rare, and you might find that it fades away. I have noticed that when I've been doing my long runs, that there is definitely a mental and physical cycle over the course, for me anyway, of like 3 to 4 miles, where when I get to like my 4th or 5th mile, I start to get this thing where I'm like, oh, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. It sort of like restarts the run all over again. It's the same thing I feel when I first go out and start the run, where if I push too hard at the beginning, I'll wear myself out, but I'm like, oh, this is hard, this is difficult, I'm breathing heavy, my heart rate's high, and maybe my knee hurts, or you start to have these thoughts, and then it kind of goes away and you hit a runner's high. I've noticed that same thing happens like 2 or 3 times over the course of a long run, and when it starts to happen, you just have to say, we were here before, we're going to push through it. Well, sometimes you start to push through it and it gets worse and it gets worse. So whatever it is, it could be a tight hamstring. It could be your heart rate is high and it goes up even higher and you're like, this isn't good, and then you got to back off. That's fine. But I think what we need to do is to learn what our body responds to and responds well to, and what it doesn't respond well to. One thing's for sure. If you follow the advice of always listen to your body, you're never going to grow. Because I'll tell you what, my body wants to sit on the sofa and watch TV all day. I mean, that's a fact, right? If I could, and if I didn't have any motivating principles, and if I didn't have any goal setting or motivation, my body would say, hey, take a nap today, get some more rest. Heck, I wouldn't even go to work, right, if I listened to my body. But on the same token, if I use this mindset of, just always push your limits, well, then I'm out there running until I'm sick to death and I can't get out of bed. Well, push your limits. Well, I think there's got to be a soft balance between those two things. And I think that balance, what I've come to is that balance is get to know your body and know when your body is giving false signals or signals that you've seen before and you can push past and push past those, but also learn your body. And in my case this week, in that 6-mile run that I did on Tuesday, I knew that, especially based on the pace that I was going, I was in a different headspace. Something was definitely wrong overall. And I'm going to chalk it up to not having enough rest. And maybe all these cold winter runs have gotten to me. Probably a combination of both of those two things. But yeah, listen to your body, sure. Definitely push your limits, yes. But also get to know your body. Know what your body's capable of. And when you do that, you're going to learn how far you can push past your limits, and you're going to learn when to listen to your body and when not to. So that's my 2 cents for the main topic this week. All right, let's get into our podcast feature this week. And this week's podcast feature is not, I guess for most of people who are listening to this, it would be a lesser known podcast. I'm not sure how well known he is. But listen, I've been following these Epstein files on a number of different podcasts. The one that and I've mentioned it before, but I didn't make it a feature, and that's Dave Smith and the podcast Part of the Problem. I've been listening to him now for probably about a month, and as all these things have come out, specifically the Epstein files, he seems to have a wealth of knowledge and a level-headed approach to this situation that I think he strikes that perfect balance between, watching these hearings, these Epstein hearings, and these two sides just clash. It's nice to listen to somebody who's like, both of you guys are kind of wrong here. And the right is wrong because of this, the left is wrong because of this. Like, everybody's implicated. And I think Thomas Massie actually said it when he was interviewing Pam Bondi. He said, listen, this strike goes back to Biden, Obama, Bush. Like, this covers like 3 generations of leaders. So neither political party is absolved at this point. We just need to get to the bottom of it. And listening to Part of the Problem, specifically this week with Thomas Massie's work, I think he had 3 episodes this week. Really good analysis of the whole situation. And one of the main reasons that I don't feel like there's any need for me to be commenting or spending a whole lot of time on those subjects, because guys like him, like Dave Smith, they're out there saying exactly what I would say, probably better than I would say it. I will give you a warning that he does not hold back. I try not to swear or curse on this podcast. He doesn't care. He is a comedian, but he also offers up his thoughts on politics and what's going on in the world. And he doesn't hold back. So that's just a fair warning if you do go to check that out. I am trying to make the podcasts each week to be uncredible, in the sense that they're people that you may not have even heard, or when I listen to them, they seem like just regular people like myself doing podcasts. So that's actually what I'm looking for, but I didn't come across any this week. And what I was listening to was Dave Smith on Part of the Problem. So be sure to check that out. Our quote of the week is interesting given our main topic. I was smart enough to prepare ahead of time. But considering our main topic and what we just discussed, the quote is, Your legs aren't giving out. Your head is giving up. Keep running. Now, I thought when I came across that quote, I picked that earlier in the week. What I do is I flip through the calendar and I look at all the quotes for the week and I pick one that I think would be best for the podcast. I picked that before I decided I would rest this week. So it's interesting that, it sort of looks at me and says, oh, you should have been running anyway. But it says your legs aren't giving out, your head is giving up, keep running. And it goes back to our main topic. It fits perfectly because it's sort of saying, hey, don't listen to your body, just push your limits. It's all in your head. Yeah, there's some truth to that. And I do think that that's important to hear that message for a lot of people to stay motivated and to keep going. But at the same time, get to know your body and know where those limits are. So that's it for this week. We're going to close things out. Obviously, thanks for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Appreciate every one of you who listens. Remember to like and subscribe, wherever you're listening, whether it's the two main places you're finding this is Spotify or YouTube. If you're watching this or listening to it on the Substack, I appreciate it. The easiest way to be reminded of when these episodes are coming out is to just subscribe to the Substack. It's free. You'll get a notification in your email. If you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, like and subscribe. I've mentioned it before. Uncredible merch, which is like shirts and things like that. Stickers. I think I'm gonna bring out some stickers. Actually, this is great. Perfect. Let me show you this one. So this is my phone, Google Pixel 9, and I got that sticker a couple months ago. That's been on there for that long, but that's one of my more kid-friendly stickers and designs. You can get that in a shirt too, but all the designs that are on on merch.uncredible.me, all those are, you can get stickers, you can get shirts, you can get sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats, there's all kinds of stuff. But that's merch, merch.uncredible.me. You can check those items out. And the reason I show you the sticker is one of the things I was worried about with these stickers is that they would be low quality from Redbubble. And I've been very impressed. Keep in mind, my phone is on me 24/7. I carry it in my back pocket. And I think the color has faded a little bit, if I'm being honest. But for the most part, that's held up. And that's literally right on the back of my phone case, right where I hold it, use it, all that stuff. So that particular sticker is held up really great. So those are actually really cheap too. Follow me on Instagram if you're looking for updates on my runs. A lot of that stuff gets shared on Instagram. I do some funny stuff on Instagram as too. Most of the things that land on Instagram, I am trying my best to put those as like a note, I think it's called, on Substack. So you can see that stuff there too. But some of the funny things I do on Instagram, I don't share on over on the Substack. So a couple small things don't end up over there. So the Instagram is at Jeremy Lundmark, and all those links are in the description. So yeah, that's it. Appreciate you stopping by, listening. I was actually expecting this to be a shorter episode, and I look at the timer, and we're right around 50 minutes. So another long one. I do try to keep it short, but last week and this week we're still running a little long. That's okay. Thanks for listening to Uncredible. Stay uncredible.